Hi and welcome. Thanks for joining us as we take this opportunity to look at how we can utilise Office 365 on our iPads. So let's get started with today's lesson. So as we identified before, there are some subtle differences between a team that you might want for staff and colleagues and teams that you would want to set up with your students. So let's just have a look at some of the similarities and differences. Again, I'm going to set up a new team using this icon here and go to create a team. And this time, let's have a look at a staff team as opposed to the class team we looked at in the previous video. In here, we go through the same setup by naming our team and adding in some additional content. And again, deciding whether we want this to be a private group or discoverable. Now, there are some subtle things here that you need to consider when creating your team. A private one means that only the team members can add additional team members. A public one would mean that anybody within your school would be able to join this group. So for that case, it could be like a sub-reading group that you want the staff to have, a book club, it could be something that people opt into. A private one probably would be something more specific to the needs of the school or the role of you as the organizer. Also, obviously, having it as discoverable means that it would show up in search results when you're searching for teams. When you're happy with your setup, just tap on Done. And again, it's going to create that team for you in the same way as it did before, allowing you to add in members. Now, in this case, there are no students allowed into this one, so you would just enter the email addresses or the names of your staff colleagues. I'm just going to go ahead and skip that section. Once that's set up, you'll see it's very similar in its setup to how we've seen this in the previous video around the setup of your team. I can create additional channels by tapping here on Manage Channels and adding things in. I can add additional members in and change the usage rights of members, and that's actually quite a useful thing to do if you want additional owners of the team because they have different usage rights. The same process before, we have our files section, anything you want all of the team to be able to look at. This is a really useful place to add timetables that you want people to be able to have access to. And if you link this to your other Office 365 tools, it will stay in the cloud and be kept up to date at all times. We also have our post section, a great place for keeping that communication within a specific topic area for your staff. It could be around team meetings, change of locations for things, etc. But just keeping people up to date in one simple place. And then finally, if we tap on the More this time, you'll see that we don't have the Assignments tab or the Grading tab, but we do still hold on to that Staff Notebook and the Notes section. Again, we'll look at these in a separate video as to how we can use Class Notebook and Staff Notebook, but just good to know that they are still there as a tool if you set up a staff group. So let's have a look at creating some of the other teams. Again, we're going to go to Create a Team, and this time we're going to have a look at this Other. And the Other group are those additional activities that you might want that could also include your students. In this case, let's say that this is going to be our basketball team. And again, we can add in that description. And again, we can change whether this is private or we want this to be public. When we're happy, tap Done. And again, go through the stages of adding those members into your team. And you'll see that again, we have exactly the same setup in terms of the team on the side. We still have our posts where we can have that communication, updates on when training might be, when fixtures might be, anything to do with that general conversation you want with your group. Files, which could include permission slips for going on trips, etc. Something that you want that team to have in that specific space. But this time when we go to More, you'll notice that there aren't the class notebooks. This is not set up as a general teaching and assessment process. This is just really about the communication, giving students access to certain bits, but we're not using this to assess anything that they're doing. So it really does keep it nice and simple in terms of the focused approach on why you would use this setup. The final one to focus on is this professional learning community. Now this one allows your teachers to work on a specific goal. PLCs are used widely amongst educators, and this enables you to scaffold that approach with your colleagues. When we go into this, again, exactly the same process. We're going to have this as our literacy coordinator group. And again, you'll notice exactly the same setup. So the process is repetitive. It's going to be really easy to set these things up, but the subtle nuances between each one. Now, because this is a PLC, this is going to go beyond my school. So this communication tab is a really, really useful place for talking about when meetings might be happening, or in this world of online learning that we're going through at the moment, keeping that conversation going with colleagues that aren't in your locality. Again, we have the file section where we can keep up to date with documentation, policy changes, etc. And then again, finally, in the more section, we have a specific notebook for our PLC. Again, we're going to take a look at this in more detail in later videos, how we're going to set up the notebooks, how the different notebooks differ. But again, it's a really, really useful place to know that that is specific to a PLC setup when you're creating those things. So the top tip really to say on the back of creating a team is know what you're creating the team for in the first place. We have a range of tools. Is it going to be a classroom activity where the students are going to be working on projects, assignments, and needing to hand things in? Is it a professional learning community that goes beyond your school and involves colleagues across different areas where you can all share thoughts and ideas to develop a specific area? Is it something which is just coordinating staff and developing their progress as they work across projects? Or is it something extracurricular to the school? Something that you want to engage the students in, but it doesn't need the formality of assessment processes built into it. So there we go. The range of different teams that you can have set up within your organisation.